Okay, so what we're doing today, it's January 31st, '04, and there's Mom, there's Deb, and there's a baby, and there's Banky, and there's Grandma, and there's Grandpa, and we're gonna do, and that's me, and we're gonna do the history of the family, of Deb's family. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right.
Berlin here on January 31st, 2004 at noon.
At noon. Okay, and I'm going to start with my father's parents. All right, there was Oscar Selinger. He was born June 13, 1872 in Sambor, Austria. His wife was Caroline Kesselman, born February 15, 1873 in Drobitz, that's Drohbycz, Austria. They were married December 25th, 1896 in Drobis. They came to America in June, either 1901 or 1902, on the SS Pennsylvania in a third-class cabin with my father, Nathan, and his brother, Louis. They became citizens in 1917. Now, for my mother. My mother's father's name was David Firkin. He was born in 1878, and he died in 1903. He came to New York with his wife, whose name was Amalia Levine. And they arrived August 4th, 1903 on the SS Potsdam with my mother, Regina, and her sister, Lottie. My grandmother actually died in 1903 or 1904. My grandfather then remarried again and had 5 other children with his second wife. They were naturalized, became citizens on July 7th, 1911. All right, my mother was born in Mitau, M-I-T-A-U, Latvia, on June 10th, 1902. Okay.
And your mother's name was?
Regina. I said that, didn't I? All right. And my father was born in Stryj, S-T-R-Y-J, Austria, June 1st, 1899. He died November 12th, 1985. My mother, I said, was born June 10th, 1902. She died March 22nd, 1995. And they were married on April 4th, my mother and my father. She was then called Jean. For some reason, she never used the name Regina. She always used the name Jean. And they were married April 14th, 1929. All right, and that's that for them. Okay?
Do you know how they met?
I have no idea how they met.
But he was a traveling salesman.
Well, he was I know he was a salesman, and my mother was a farmer's daughter, so that's a joke. About the traveling salesman and the farmer's daughter. I don't know what my grandfather actually did. At one point, he owned a hotel in Hunter Mountain, and my mother was the cook. He ran a...
Before she met Grandpa?
Yes. But she was 26 when she got married.
Wow.
So
it's late.
Yes. So she was the cook in this place. I do remember when I was a kid being there, very little of it. I don't remember it at all. And then he sold it. If he hadn't sold it, it would have been worth a fortune, because now it's a great big ski area. All right, but I don't know what my grandfather actually did. He did lose a leg when a barn fell on him.
A barn?
A barn.
Okay.
So, yeah, there was a fire, and a piece of the barn fell on him, and he lost his leg.
This was when you were alive? Or this was before he met your grandmother?
No, this was when he was already in the United States. This was after he had children.
Oh, okay.
All right?
Now,
did you know your grandparents?
Yes.
How old were you when your grandparents died? About?
I have no idea. I don't remember. But I don't remember my grandmother. My second grandmother. Actually, not my actual grandmother. My grandfather, I remember, he lived in the basement apartment of an aunt and uncle. So I do remember him. I do not remember my grandmother. She died way before. And I do remember my father's parents lived for a long time. I mean, Daddy knew them. So You met my grandparents.
Yes.
Yeah, my father's parents. Yeah. My parents were married in 1929. My brother Martin was born in 1931.
So how long had they been married?
2 years.
They were married 2 years, and then they had your brother.
Right.
Okay.
And then I was born in 1937.
Which is what was the age difference?
6.5 years.
Wow.
Difference. So.
And where were your parents living when they first got married?
I don't know where they lived when they first got married. When I was born, we lived right off Bay Parkway. We only lived there for a short time, and then we moved to 1913 Stillwell Avenue
and this
in
was
Brooklyn. Everything was in Brooklyn.
Okay.
All my aunts and uncles lived in Brooklyn. All my grandparents lived in Brooklyn. Everybody.
Your future husband also.
Everybody lived in Brooklyn.
Okay.
All right. I don't remember anything of living there. I do remember when we lived on 1913 Stillwell Avenue. My public school was right across the street, so I could walk to school.
Do you remember anything about your parents, how they interacted with each other?
Yeah, they fought all the time.
They did?
Yes.
Like they yelling?
Yes, they fought all the time.
About?
Anything and everything. They were always fighting.
Just yelling at each other?
Yelling at each other.
Did they hit each other?
No, they didn't hit each other. There was no hitting until my mother became senile, and she used to hit my father.
Okay.
Now,
But there was no hitting, just a lot of yelling. They should have been divorced.
Okay.
All right? But it was a thing that you didn't do in those days. You didn't get divorced.
Were they ever happy? Do you ever remember?
I don't ever remember them being happy.
nice.
I don't. I don't ever remember my father going over and kissing my mother or anything. No, they were not a happy couple.
Okay.
And from what
Go ahead.
All right, as far as my brother and I are concerned, we both slept in the same room because we had in Stillwell Avenue, we had a 2-bedroom apartment.
Okay.
We both slept in the same room. I slept in the same room with my brother till he went to the Army.
Were you close?
Not really. We weren't close till after we both got married because we were 6.5 years apart. It was like when I was born, he was in school. Right. So it was like having no siblings at home growing up.
Did he take care of you ever, or babysit for you, or grandma was always around?
Grandma was always around, yeah. So there was really he was so much older than I was. I always looked up to him.
Right.
But there was really no friendship or anything because we were so far apart in age. We never did anything together.
Right.
He used to take me to the movies. Oh, we used to go to the movies together on Saturday, and I was allowed to have 1 box of candy. And when I said I wanted more, he said, no, you have to eat the box.
And how much was a movie when you would go to the movies?
Quarter. We went to the Stillwell Dump. And movies were a quarter, and you saw a newsreel, a cartoon, a chapter, and 2 movies.
What's a chapter?
A chapter. Zorro, or Buck Rogers, or Tom Mix, and that's what you saw. You went to the movies, and you were there all day long.
And was there a favorite movie that you had when you were a kid?
Was there what?
A favorite movie?
I don't even remember any of the movies. I know I liked Zorro the chapter. Then we used to go every single week because you couldn't miss a chapter.
Did you have any animals or
No.
pets?
No.
Did you want an animal or a pet?
I don't think so.
Do you remember your childhood being fun or happy?
No.
Do you don't have any happy memories of your childhood?
No, not really.
You're asking yes or no questions, honey.
Is there?
Yeah, that's okay.
Is there? Do you when you think about your mother when you were a little girl, if you can think back to what your relationship was with her when you were a little girl?
I really don't remember anything. I do remember only from stories, not from that when we used to live before we moved to Stillwell Avenue. My mother, she lived on the ground floor, and she used to put me outside and tie a rope around me.
How old were you?
2, 3, I don't know, 4.
Okay.
And she'd tie a rope and leave me there, so she wouldn't have to worry about me, running away.
Outside?
Outside. Well, then you didn't have to worry about people stealing children and things. I mean, I did never do it today, but that's what she used to leave me out there with a rope.
Do you remember laughing with her, or her teaching you how to cook, or her or like?
Well, she did teach me how to knit.
She did. Okay.
Oh yes.
Did,
to knit
was that fun?
And to sew, you know, on the machine and do cross stitch and all those other things.
Was it fun to learn from her, or was it nerve wracking?
I don't think it was nerve wracking, but I have no memory. I have no memory of it. I do remember one thing when she taught me to knit, and the first thing I knitted started out this way, and then it just kept going like this because I would add a stitch to each end, so I was doing something wrong, and it would go like that. But other than that, no. You asked about a birthday party before. The only birthday I remember was my Sweet 16. We had it in a Chinese restaurant, and it was all girls. And other than that, I don't remember any other birthday party. Don't forget, we didn't have film, so it wasn't something, a lot of the things that you remember because you have watched it. Mm-hmm. I don't know really how much you remember or how much you think you remember, only because you've seen it. We didn't have those things. Right. My father used to take me every summer to Steeplechase, which was an amusement park in Coney Island, where you went in, you bought a ticket, and you had about 10 rides. You can go on any 10 of the rides that you want. That's where the parachute jump is now. But there was steeplechase, so you'd go in a barrel, and you had to go in, and there was horses that we used to ride on, and every year he took me to steeplechase.
Now, is that anything like the Coney Island Park that's there now, or is it?
I don't know if Steeplechase is still there, but Steeplechase was the name of this one place where you bought one ticket. Okay. And you could go on a whole bunch of rides, like they do have now in Adventureland or whatever that is.
Right. Do you remember, how about with Grandpa? Were you close with Grandpa? Was there any... Grandpa
was really a traveling salesman. He wasn't home much.
How often was he home? What was your day-to-day life like? Like, how often was he gone? How often was he home? What was it like when he came home?
I don't remember. When I was young, I really have there were very few memories. I remember my teachers. My kindergarten teacher's name was Mrs. Dinallo, and when I went to college, I was still living there, and I used to catch the bus to go to college right in front of the school, and sometimes I would see her. So she was still teaching from my kindergarten days to when I went to college. My first grade teacher, my second grade teacher was Mrs. Shemin. I don't remember the others, but I don't remember anything in high school, the teachers' names or things like that. But
were you good? Were you good in school?
Yes, I was very. And what happened in school? Then you changed classes every 6 months. And my girlfriend, who lived next door, was 6 months older than I was. She went to school and she cried and she cried and she cried. And they couldn't do anything about it. So they sent me to school. I was too young. They sent me to school to stay with her. So I always say I was really left back in kindergarten because then I had to repeat the whole thing for my own age. But I guess then it didn't matter. There probably weren't enough children to make a difference. But so I really got left back in kindergarten because I had to repeat it again for my own age.
So you were always older than all the rest of the kids in your class?
No,
just went early.
I just went early. Those 6 months really didn't count.
Oh, okay.
I just went to be with her. When I went to school, she stopped crying, so we were there together.
Was your brother good in school?
Yes, he was very smart.
And were your parents proud of both of you? Did you get the sense growing up that your parents were proud of you and thought you were smart?
I always thought that my brother was the favorite. Always.
Why?
Because I just, it was always him. In fact, I always used to say that I was adopted. Until one day I found a picture of my mother when it was my age. And I looked at her face, and I looked at my face, and I knew that I wasn't adopted. Because it was the same face. But he was always the favorite. I always felt that he was the favorite. That he could do no wrong.
Did you feel you had any kind of special relationship with your father? Any games you used to play or places he would take you special?
Well, he would take me to steeplechase. He taught me how to ride a bike. Other than that, I don't know. My mother was the disciplinarian in the house. So he had nothing to do with anything like that.
Would you describe them? How would you describe them as people? If you not as your parents, but if you had to describe their personalities or their nature, how would you describe each of your parents?
I would describe my father as very easygoing, and my mother is very, very strong, and very controlling, like a daughter and granddaughter. There was a time when my father was on a trip. I was must have been 18 or 19, and my mother decided that we were going to move. He was on a trip, so we went to Bay Parkway, and they were putting up a co-op apartment house. And my mother and I went. She signed all the papers, and we bought an apartment while he was while he was on a trip. And when he came home, my mother said to him, "We bought this apartment. We're going to move."
I wouldn't even think that. And what year was that around?
I'd already
55.
started college in
55.
on Stillwell Avenue, so I must have been. I was 17 when I went into college, so I must have been 18.
I wouldn't think that they would let women even do such things back then, legally.
Yeah, that's true. But she did it. And then when he came home, she said, we bought this apartment.
Okay.
So that was that. Yeah, that's true about. But she did it, and then we moved to Bay Parkway, and that was that.
Now, did you have any nicknames as a kid?
Schminza, when I was a baby.
You were
Schminza is it's a Jewish name meaning monkey. And
Okay.
my cousin Marcia also had that nickname. She was 10 years older than I. She still is. She's 10 years older than I am. And she now uses that as her email address.
Okay. All right. Try.
What else?
Let's see. Do you remember any recurring dreams as a kid?
No.
Okay.
No.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
In college.
In college?
Yeah, your doctor, what was his name?
Oh, that wasn't a favorite teacher. I guess my favorite teacher was probably my chemistry teacher in high school, because he gave me a job during the summer working as a counselor in a hotel in Liberty.
Did you, when you went to, so you went to school and then you went, what were the names of your elementary school and did they just have elementary school and high school?
I went
or?
to PS 97, which was my elementary school, and then I went to Seth Lowe Junior High School, and then I went to Lafayette High School, and then I went to Brooklyn College.
And all of these schools were in Brooklyn?
Everything was in Brooklyn.
Now, when did you decide to go to college? Did your parents say you must go to college?
I don't know, I think it was just assumed that I would go to college.
What did you take in college?
I took teaching, because at that time all women took teaching.
Did you have any aspirations when you were young of what you wanted to be when you grew up?
No. If I had it to do over again, I wouldn't have taken education courses.
What would you do?
I probably would have taken something with math, been an accountant or something like that. But at the time, you went to college, and because you could always fall back on being a teacher, because then you got married. Supposedly you got married, you had children, and then you could always go back to work as a teacher.
Did you want, and what did you wind up being from your
Well, what
college
happened
courses?
was I had taken a course in speech, and I liked it so much, so I switched my major to speech and my minor to education, so I became a speech teacher rather than a public school teacher or something like that.
Did you enjoy that?
That I enjoyed, yeah. I enjoyed the speech work.
Did you work, what happened after you graduated college? What did you do?
I went right to work. I was already married.
Okay.
Hold on.
All right.
We skipped a bunch of stuff.
All right.
Go ahead,
Just ask the questions.
No. When did you learn how to drive? How old were you?
I was 18. My brother taught me how to drive.
Okay.
But first, taught you the engine, how.
Oh, right. And before he taught me how to drive, he said I had to know how to work a car and how to change a tire. So I had to do all that before he would let me even behind the wheel.
Okay. And
he taught me to drive a stick shift, because he had an MG that he had brought home from Germany when he was in the army.
was that a 3-speed or a 5-speed? What's that?
4.
Oh. Okay.
No, 3 and 1.
But question, when you went to school all these years, did you walk to school?
Yes.
Or did you have to take a bus?
I walked to school, to all the schools except college.
And you took a bus to college?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when were you first allowed to go into Manhattan?
You mean by myself?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
Or do you
I
remember when
used to go. Actually, that's something that, because you brought it back. I would go in on a Saturday with my mother, and we'd go to the Radio City Music Hall for 90 cents,
Wow.
and we'd see a movie.
Just
and
you
a
and
show,
her?
just the two of us. One time I remember my father was in the city. I don't know why. We went to the Radio City Music Hall. My mother and I, the early show. We saw the show and the movie, and then we met my father, and then we went to the Roxy and saw another movie and show.
Now, what was the show? What was the show? What was the like? What did they
Well,
have
you
for
know, like the
shows?
Radio City Music Hall, they still have shows. They still put on the Christmas show and things, but they used to have a singer, a dancer, the Rockettes, and they'd give you a movie and a show for 90 cents.
Oh, so when did you get your first car?
My first car?
Yeah.
I never had a car.
So when you were driving, you was driving your.
I was driving my parents. I was driving my parents' car. I didn't have a car until we got married, and then we had a car.
Okay.
But I never had a car.
Did you always want to, before we get into things with you and Daddy, did you always want to get married? Did you think of when you were young, did you think about wanting to have children and wanting to get married, or was that just something that everyone does?
It was something that everyone did. That was it.
Did you have boyfriends in high school, or did people have boyfriends in high school back then?
Yeah, but I wasn't very popular.
What were you like as in high school?
Shy. Yeah,
What clique would you put yourself in? Were you a geek? Were you?
No, I wasn't. No, they didn't have geeks. No, I wasn't a geek. I was just.
She said she was smart and shy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, but they didn't have things like that. But I just, I didn't date a lot in high school. Didn't have a boyfriend.
Did they have proms back then?
Yes,
like a dance?
I didn't go to my prom in high school. First of all, I graduated high school in 3.5 years, so I graduated in January. Then I went right into college. The prom, they didn't have a graduation for those people, and they didn't have a prom because you had to come back in June. So after being in high school, in college for 6 months, I wasn't going back to go to a prom in high school.
So how old were you when you went to college?
17.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I made up a class. I did high school. I made up 6 months, and when I was in public school, as I said before, there was you didn't go to the first grade. You went to 1A and 1B, 2A and 2B. When I was in the second grade, they decided to change the grades over and make them 1 year instead of 6 months, instead of A and B. And it just so happens I was in the grade where I had to make up in 1 year I had to do 3 A's and B's. So I made up 6 months there.
Okay.
So I made up 6 months in public school and 6 months in high school. So I was 17 when I went into college.
Now, did you move out, or were you still living at home in college, or?
I lived at home till I got married.
Okay.
And that was at Bay
At
Parkway?
Bay Parkway. Yeah.
Okay.
And going back to, you asked about things that I do remember going shopping with my mother. We would go to Klein's on 14th Street, and then we would always go to Chuck full of nuts, and I'd have a Chuck full of nuts sandwich, and I'd have chocolate milk and a donut, and that was our thing that we would do on a Saturday.
Did you have a special toy that you remember, or a stuffed animal, or a
No.
special game you liked to play, or?
I would play cards with my mother. She was a good card player.
Do you remember laughing with her ever?
Yes,
or?
yeah, but it just, I don't know, I just did not. See, as I'm talking, I remember, some things that are, but I don't remember having a happy childhood.
Now, did you like eat dinner as a family?
Yes,
Was
we
that-
ate dinner as a family.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was Uncle Martin like included in that?
Oh,
Was he
yes.
ever home?
Oh, he
Or-
was home all the time. The only time he wasn't home, and he went to college in New York. He went to Polytech, so he did not go away to college. So he was there, and he was home until he went into the Army,
Okay.
and that was after college because he was in the ROTC. So he didn't go into the Army till he was probably 20.
What about on you said something about Grandma and Grandpa on birthdays and anniversaries. Do you remember them exchanging gifts or cards or?
Not until after we got married, you know, when we would give them things. But I don't remember. I just don't remember anything.
No, it wasn't a house full of laughter.
No, it was not a house full of laughter. There was a house full of lots of yelling.
Okay.
Lots of yelling.
Yeah, that's is there anything? Is there?
See, and as I said, we didn't have movies and cameras and things to remember.
Right.
Some of the things that you remember, you only remember because you've seen it on film.
Well, what about I remember from my childhood things about holidays, or was there special Hanukkah?
We would go to a Seder at my grandma's house. They'd set up a long table. My mother and all the aunts and all the aunts would cook, and we'd all be there, and all the men would be on one side, and all the women would be on the other. They would do the service, and we would just sit and laugh, and eat while they were doing the service.
Did you go to temple on a regular basis, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Were you bat mitzvah?
No, they didn't have bat mitzvah then. I was confirmed.
And how often did you go to Hebrew school?
We just went on Sundays. And when I first started to go, and I used to walk because my parents didn't even have a car, but my grandfather had an old Franklin. It was this big car. It was old then.
Okay.
And he used to pick me up and drive me to Sunday school. But first he would pick up bagels or rolls, and he'd bring them to the house, to my mother and father, and then he'd take me and bring me to Sunday school.
Okay.
Yeah. And when I walked, I wasn't allowed to, because there was a great big street on Bay Parkway and 86th Street. And there was a train station there.
Elevated.
And I wasn't allowed to cross. So I had to go up on my side, go up the steps and cross over this way so I wouldn't have to cross Bay Parkway, or in order to get to the other side, because my mother didn't want me crossing the street by myself.
And how old were you?
7, 8.
And you were walking by yourself
And
at
walking
7
by
or 8.
myself, yes.
In Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn?
In Brooklyn. Also, my cousin Marsha, who's 10 years older than I am, had a baby when I was 10. She had a baby. I used to babysit for her baby, and they lived in Brooklyn, but I used to take a train. I used to take the train to her house.
At 10?
At 10, or maybe 11.
By yourself?
By myself. I would take the train to her house.
That's
babysit,
around Joshua's age.
and stay over, and then sleep over the house, and then come home the next day by myself.
Okay, how does that sound to you when I say
Say,
that's how old Joshua is?
Right. I wouldn't allow Joshua on a train when he.
You don't even let him walk in a parking lot without holding your hand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I used to walk and go, and I used to go ice skating in a black neighborhood. I used to go by train by myself, meet my friends there.
And what year would this be? This would be in the 40s?
No,
60s,
it would
60s.
be. No, I was born in '37,
Oh,
so
50s.
it would be in the 40s.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jeez.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think what the best thing to do is here. Should we get Daddy's whole side and then come
Yeah.
together
That would
and
be fine.
okay? So
Okay, is there anything else?
Anything else you want to ask?
Is there anything else you want to tell your
I'm
granddaughter or
trying to
family?
Your
remember other things.
generation-
Oh,
Generations to come.
the drinking, your father and your grandfather?
Oh, well, my grandfather and my father always drank.
Okay.
I mean,
you come from alcoholics
Yeah.
on all sides.
All the uncles would bring your grandfather? Yeah.
Well, my grandfather they would all bring him a bottle, and nobody knew that the other one was bringing him a bottle. He probably finished a bottle of scotch a week.
Sheesh. Now, did you read a lot when you were a kid?
No, I hated to read.
Really?
Yes.
You read all the time now.
I read constantly now, and I if I don't have a book in the house, I get
Okay.
Ajita. But when I was a kid, if I had to read something for school, I would read the condensed book from the Reader's Digest, or I'd read the
Cliff Notes?
They didn't. I don't think they had Cliff Notes then. I don't remember Cliff Notes, but they had classic comics.
Okay.
So I would read that. But I hated to read when I was in young,
Wow.
and now I read all the time.
Wow.
I always have a book with me.
Now, how about like now you're really into like crosswords and.
And I used to do that. I got from my father.
Oh, and what and
I used to
talk
do that
about
in junior high school.
talk about your father also with in terms of math and things.
Oh, well, he could add a column of numbers faster than you could punch them into a calculator and do.
Okay.
Yeah, but he used to do the puzzle. I used to do the puzzle with him. And on Sunday, we used to get two papers. We used to get the Herald Tribune and the Times. And I used to rush to get there first to get the puzzle to do, because there were no copy machines where you could make copies for
Right.
someone else to do it.
Right.
But we used to do the puzzle. I remember in junior high school, I was doing crossword puzzles.
Now, was there anything like when you were a kid that, as far as like a world that changed, that amazed you? Like,
Or that you remember any events.
The only event I really remember is when FDR died.
Okay.
Tell who FDR is, Franklin.
Okay, Delano Roosevelt. Well, he was the president for all of my life. So when he died, I remember I was sitting at the window, and I saw my uncle coming home from the train because he had to pass our house to get to his house, and I called out to the window to tell him that Roosevelt had died. I remember that. Any other world? I don't remember anything about the war. Oh, I do remember we had to sit when they had air raid shelters. We used to have to sit under the table, and if my parents weren't home, my brother and I would take our pillows and go under the kitchen table. And in school, we used to have air raid drills where we'd have to go under the desks.
Right. Now, were there any like inventions that came out that you were amazed by, or?
Not that I remember.
Did you have television or?
Oh, my father sold the grill cloth for television sets.
No, what is that? What is
That-
the grill cloth?
That's the cloth that's
It covers
the
the speakers.
speakers.
Yeah.
The first televisions were great big things, and they had speakers on the bottom, and they had this grill cloth, and that's what he sold. And we didn't have a television, and he worked in that line, and he kept saying, well, they're not good enough yet to buy.
Perfected. Yeah.
So we never. I remember one birthday he gave me there was a card because I wanted a television. So the card had a television on it. that was my television.
So you had radio.
We did have radio.
Did you listen? Was
Yes.
what was that like? We listen to radio now for just music. What?
No, used to have all the same things. They had the Lone Ranger. They had soap operas. They had
News.
when I used to come home for lunch. I used to
Argyle
listen
Sunday.
to Argyle Sunday. They had.
Did the whole family gather around the radio?
For like Lone Ranger or any of those things for.
No, I used to listen in my room, and I know my mother used to say, my father or my mother would say, and I would study. How can you study with the radio on? But I used to.
Now, did you ever have like one of those decoder things that they have, like little Orphan Annie decoders
Oh.
or any of those things? That
I
they...
used to send away for some of those things, but I don't remember any of them really.
And when did you get a television?
We finally did get a but I used to go on Tuesday nights. Everyone used to go to watch Milton Berle because that was the big thing. Even the stores on 86th Street used to close. Nothing was open on Tuesday nights because no one. They used to close everything because everybody was home watching Milton Berle, and I went next door to my friend's house to watch Milton Berle.
Now, when was as far as like game shows, became very big?
Not when I was little.
Okay.
I don't remember any other show that was on television other than
Milton.
Milton Berle.
Molly Goldberg. They would be
I don't
ethnic.
remember that.
You don't remember that? Oh.
No.
Is there anything?
The rest of the stuff is adult stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's okay.
I
I mean,
think
I'm
so.
just that she had an adult. You had an adult life before you met Daddy. When did you? Before we go in, when did you? So I know where to actually stop here.
Yeah.
When did you meet
I was
Daddy?
19.
You were 19, and you had You had been out of college for
No,
how long?
I was still in college.
Oh, you were still in college.
I was still in college.
Okay, so is there anything?
We were married. I was still in college.
Is there anything about your life that you feel would be important or interesting to talk about for us to know before you ever met Daddy?
No,
Anything?
because my life
Like,
really
yeah.
began when I met Daddy.
Okay, well on that note, why don't you guys switch seats?
Would you like something to drink?
And there's-
Hold on, we're gonna pause for a second. We're gonna pause. All good, and we're recording.
Go back a little bit. You can see it if you want.
Yeah, no, it's good.
You okay? Am I
We're
on?
good. You're on.
And everybody chewing, remember that you can be heard. The mic is closer.
It's okay. We can.
The mic is closer to you than it is to him, and there's.
This is a typical afternoon. With the
Oh,
Tridels.
don't put your new voice. Don't put your
My radio voice?
Don't put your.
I hardly ever
always
use my
loved
radio
when
voice.
when Roy would come over.
You know we're taping this, dude.
Oh, are we taping right now? Seriously.
Yes, we're taping now.
Remember when Roy would come over
Okay.
and he was like, "Hello," and he'd give him one of those handshakes.
Yeah, give him the.
Okay. Go ahead, Dad.
Hi, I'm Grandpa. Okay. I was asked to give some. What's going?
It's good.
I'm the happy one in the family. I'm not on anything lately. Okay. My daughter is hysterical. Okay. The far back as I can remember, I can remember my grandmother and grandfather. We all lived in a house, a 4-family brownstone in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. There was my grandmother and grandfather who lived in the basement. The basement is not a bad place because it's street level, and in a 4-family brownstone, that's the place you went into on the ground level. Then from the ground level, you went up one flight, which was usually a parlor. Do I have to contend with this
No.
going over the side?
I want to know the but can you start with your grandparents where they're from and
Okay, I
and
will.
their lives,
Okay,
and then
but
we'll lead up to you.
Let me start off with my life, what I remember first, and then I'll go back to them, because they are before my time. So I'm just starting off what I remember in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, in a 4-family brownstone, 100 Clymer Street. As I said, you came in on the ground floor, which is like 4 steps down off the street, and that's where my grandmother and grandfather had a kitchen, had a workroom, because my grandfather made watch cases. The cases that watches were put in to be displayed in a glass case, the velvet covered wood, and that's what he did for a living. When you went one flight up in the brownstone, there was a parlor and a bedroom. And these 4 rooms are the rooms that my grandparents lived in. I remember living on the floor above them with my mother and father, and above them, above us, was another apartment, another 2-room apartment, which was rented out to someone. We had about 4 or 5 or 6 people who lived there in the time that I remember as a child. So on these 4 levels, we had 3 of the 4 levels, and we rented the 4th level. There was a cellar underneath that. That's where coal was dropped in from the street to heat the whole house. There was coal, and then there was a little room, which we called in Yiddish a kamerel, which was a work room where my father had an electric saw, he had an electric grinder, and all tools all around it. And I loved going down there to work and to get away from my father.
Imagine that.
Yeah, okay. Now you're asking about my grandparents and my great-grandparents.
Where are they from?
Okay. On my mother's side of the family, they came from a place called Yekaterinoslav, which means Catherine's Russia. It's right near, or it encompasses the area around the Dnieper River. They had a name in those days, a Russian name. Jews were not allowed to have second names, so they only had like Jacob, the son of Morris, and Joseph, the son of Harry. So everybody had names like that. But when they came to America, my grandparents, at Ellis Island, they were asked, "What is your name?" And my grandfather answered, "Nie pomniewski," which means "I don't remember" in Russian. And so they wrote down D-N-I-E-P, Dnieper, and they crossed it off and they wrote Nepo, N-E-P-O, which was short for Nie pomniewski. and that was their name that they had for the rest of their lives, Nepo.
So your grandparents came to America?
Yes.
I thought your parents were.
My mother and father were not born here. They came to America also.
Oh, with your grandparents.
With my grandparents, which is a whole story, which is like you can take 20 minutes just to tell of their adventure to get to America, to get to New York City.
And
but let me just start with my grandparents.
And what were the names?
Harry and Bella.
Bella?
Bella, B-E-L-L-A, or one L, B-E-L-A.
B-E-L-A.
B-E-L-A. Like Bela, but that would be the Hungarian Bela, but this is Bella. My grandmother's father, now that's my great-great-grandfather, was a soldier under Tsar Nicholas II. He was a soldier. It was, in those days, what they used to do is they take young children, even Jewish children, and conscript them, and they would have to serve 25 years in the Russian army. So her father was a soldier for 25 years. After his 25 years,
Whose father?
my grandmother's
Your grandmother's father.
Now here's the story. After his 25 years, he came home. He married my great-grandmother, and at that time he had a brother, and the brother was conscripted at that time into the army. And the brother's wife came to my great-grandfather and said, "We have 9 children. What are we going to do without 9 children? With our 9 children, and he's going into the army." And they talked him into going back for another 25 years of servitude to the Tsar, because they could not let the children be without a father. When he left for the army, 1 year later, my grandmother was born.
1 year?
Well, whatever it was,
Nine.
the time.
9 months.
Well, that's a very
9
different
months.
story.
Okay, well,
And that wasn't your grandfather.
as I said, this was in the area called Yekaterinoslav, or Catherine's Russia. Tsar Nikolai got married, and to solidify the union between Germany and Russia, he married one of the princesses from Germany, and he gave her this land called Catherine's Russia, Yekaterinoslav. And you know the name now, Nepo, comes from Nepomniachtchi.
Which
Okay.
means, I
Which-
forgot.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay.
And they lived along the Dnieper River. Now there's a whole story on a tape, which I brought here. And if you listen to this tape, it tells in my mother's voice her trip from Russia to New York. And it's not a direct trip, going through South America, going to England, going back to Russia, and then finally to the United States. Very interesting. And that's as far as I want to go on this, because you have the tape.
So your mother's last name was Nepo.
Nepo, N-E-P-O.
Okay.
Well, that's because of the...
Right.
And how many children did your grandparents have?
Okay, my mother, on my mother's side of the family, there were 4 uncles and an aunt.
6 children.
What?
6 children.
6 children. Yeah, 6 children. Okay, and on my father's, there were 2 brothers,
There were 3 children.
3 children. That's all.
3 brothers.
3 brothers.
3 brothers.
3 brothers, and the other side was 6.
Okay. So both of your
No, your father. Where did your father come from?
My father was born in, well, let's go to my father's side of the family. They know very little about that. I don't have an oral history, and they didn't talk about it much, but they came from Poland, a place called, if I pronounce it correctly, Broznie Gubernia. A gubernia is like a town, and Broznie is probably the name of it, so Broznie Gubernia. It's probably no different than a place called Oshkosh here, but that's what the area was. They came here about the same time my mother's family came in 1905 in that area.
And they were children? Your father was a
Was
child?
yes. My father was the oldest of the children, and he's gone. But I still have one uncle alive today in Florida. He's 96 years old.
Wow.
My uncle Abe, and he has all his hair, beautiful hair,
And it's not even gray.
and it's not even gray,
But
really.
has no teeth.
At 96, but no teeth. That's all.
Does he dye his hair?
No.
No.
And
No.
he attributes
Very
it
little
to
gray.
daily massaging when he was a child.
Head of hair.
A full head of hair. Okay, now I'd like to tell you about my childhood then.
Okay, well, actually, one more
Wait,
Question, go ahead, let's
One more
hear it.
question. No, where did your mother's family and your father's family live?
When they came here,
Yes.
Yeah, like how did your parents ever meet or anything like that?
the meeting, I can...
And what did your mother do for a living? And what did your
Okay,
father do for a
okay.
living? And how did they meet?
Okay, okay. As I said, my grandfather made watch cases for display. He was very good at it. He used glues and everything. Okay. And my grandmother was, as you have today, you have a housewife. And I remember going down into the basement area on a Friday morning, and she'd be on all fours scrubbing the floor for the Sabbath. And she would scrub the floor, and then as funny as it may sound, she would put down newspapers on the floor so when you'd walk on it, you wouldn't dirty the floor. And just before the Sabbath, all the papers would come up and it would be sparkling clean. And she'd be cooking all day, except for the early morning. Early morning she would go to the chicken market, which was on Havermeyer Street, which is only about nine blocks away from us, and buy a live chicken and have it, the neck would be wrung,
Right.
and she'd bring a dead chicken back, of course, and then if it cost a couple of pennies, I think it was like 5 cents or 7 cents or 9 cents to have the chicken plucked by a woman who would be sitting there next to the chicken where you buy the chickens, and she would pluck the feathers on it. But then when she came back, my grandmother would always be on the sink pulling out the little chicken feathers that were still left in there.
And this was in Brooklyn?
In Brooklyn, in that 4-family brownstone.
Okay.
And she had how many kids again?
My grandmother?
Yeah.
My grandmother? What? Six children.
Okay.
But we were the only ones that lived with her.
No, but I'm talking now. This is when Nana was a child. I'm talking about how Nana's growing up and how Nana met her husband.
Oh, okay.
And what Nana
there's
did
not much I can tell you about, except my
what
mother.
did she do for a living?
Okay, my mother was almost blind. According
From birth?
to, yes, from birth. There's a story that she used to tell that she and her younger brother would be walking on one side of the street in Russia, and on the other side of the street, her brother would tell her, read the signs in the windows of the stores across the street, like butcher shop, whatever the signs were, and my mother would laugh because she would say, who could see that far? She could never see that far. She wore glasses which were at least 3/8 of an inch thick on the outside, and the center was so thin, they were concave on both sides, and without her glasses she was legally blind. She could not see. But she would read books like this, 1 inch away from the paper. She would read books. She would memorize poems and stories. And she was an actor. She would entertain. She was a left-wing person. She was a socialist. She went all over to entertain. She did Yiddish. She spoke Yiddish fluently, Russian, Spanish. She spoke many languages. As I said, she was a left-wing person.
Did she go to school when she? I mean, when her growing up, did she lived in Brooklyn? Did she go to school?
She went to school in
no,
Russia.
she went to school in Russia, and wherever they resided for the months and the years in her travels from Russia to the United States.
How old was she when she first got to Brooklyn?
oh God, that would have to be 1910.
She must have been a teenager.
Yeah, she must have been about 12 or 13.
Okay.
And
So she went to high school in Brooklyn.
Well, I think she went more to public school, or remedial school, than to a high school. She didn't have a real formal education. She didn't go to school. She learned with the School of Hard Knocks. She did acquire a knowledge of sewing machines. In the story she tells in the tape, she mentions that in the ships that she was on, they were traveling with sewing machines, and I guess she must have been shown because she went to work as a seamstress in a sweatshop. She used to work in the area, so she wouldn't have to travel because of her eyes, I guess. She wouldn't travel. So she worked in sweatshops in the area, and she became, because of her left-wing associations, she became a shop steward and organized shops. And she became one of the people who worked with the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. She became a minor officer in that organization, probably just a steward or a head steward. And I remember one time she worked making handkerchiefs, edging handkerchiefs from material, and they used to get like 10 cents a dozen handkerchiefs to sew them and then to cut all the threads off, and they wanted a penny raise on their wages because it was all piecework. That means you got paid for the quantity that you put out. And they went on strike for a penny a dozen more. And what happened was the boss wouldn't give it to her. And she also played a mandolin. And she walked around the outside of the perimeter of the building, which was on a corner, and she got the people to sing, most of them were Jews, in Yiddish, "Der Boss is a bested for the 1 cent raise." And she would play on the mandolin, and they would march around. I think they finally got it, but I don't think it was because of her singing or because of the marching around, but it showed solidarity. And like I said, she was a musician. She used to entertain with what we call declamatsias, or stories, 1, 2, 3, 4-page stories. As I said, she would read and memorize one line at a time. She's an amazing woman.
Wait, did she act on, like, in plays and things?
No, she was never in plays, but she was a member of the International Workers' Order Chorus. She sang in a chorus. She also was a member of the Freiheit Mandolin Orchestra. This is when I was 2 or 3 years old.
No, I'm talking before she met your father.
Oh, well, no,
Well, okay, because I want to know about her life a little, and you told me until
I don't know much about it, and she never spoke much about it, except she met my father during the time when she was working in these progressive organizations, as in left-wing organizations, and he was much younger than she was. He was 10 years younger than she was.
Really?
Wow.
Really?
I don't think 10.
Now,
Well, you don't think it was 10? I think it was
about
closer to 10.
6. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay.
now,
but-
wait, but your father was how old when he came to the United States?
I think 3 or 4.
And his life in Brooklyn,
No,
you don't know anything
about it, except they lived in the area where my grandmother used to go to get her chickens on Havamaya Street. They lived on 195 Havamaya Street, which was a dairy and food area where you could buy anything you want there. And my grandfather, who had on my father's side, had no real trade. So what he had a knife, a folding knife, which was about 6 inches long, and he would go into these food places and ask them if he can open up boxes for them and sort out fruit. So he was an all-around, just doing odd jobs.
That's your father's father.
My father's father. He had no mechanical skills. He had no visible means of support. In Europe, he would have been called a Luftmensch, a person who gets sustenance out of the air, Luft, air. He could earn a living from nothing. And that's what he did. He used to go around doing odd jobs all along Havemeyer Street. What?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, okay. He would do anything, and he would bring home here a chicken from here, or he'd bring home some fruit. Okay.
Movie ticket,
Yeah,
pizza.
my daughter is laughing at me, right?
Okay.
He used the barter system.
Okay.
So what do you know of how your mother met your father?
I have no idea. I remember one picture, an old black and white photo of, this is not funny, of my father standing on a rock in probably it was Prospect Park, or was some minor park, or maybe it may have been upstate in the mountains someplace, but he was standing absolutely nude, like an Adonis, and this picture was hidden someplace in a drawer, and my father was built really like an Adonis, and I guess she fell in love with him. I don't know, but that's the only.
He was nude in Prospect Park?
Could have been, yeah, on a rock. You know, they take pictures. They're laughing.
And Grandma was a leftist communist.
Yes.
Was she a communist?
I don't know, but she
was a socialist.
was a socialist,
She was a
and
socialist.
but very leaning toward the red. She was very into when the war broke out, and the Russians were still on our side the first time.
What war?
The Second World War. That's before the Iron Curtain fell and everything else. She was into raising money for the Russian War Relief, the RWR, and she used to go and do.
The First World War.
No, honey, that's the Second World War. There were no Russian War Relief in the Second World War.
All right.
In the First World War. So she was very, very into that thing. When we get into my life,
Okay.
I'll tell you the other stories on that. But she was a powerful woman. She could do anything.
Except cook or clean.
Yeah, she couldn't clean. We have a joke in our house. Used to be, she could screw up cornflakes. You know, she could turn it into something which was totally unedible.
So you married a woman just like
Who was a
yourself.
wonderful cook.
You cooked?
She doesn't like to cook.
She
My
doesn't
I
wife.
don't cook now, but I did.
Yes, yes. We'll go into that later also.
Okay, so did
okay, going into the time after they met, they got married in 1928,
No.
and I was born in 1929.
Hold on. Did you have something about their life?
No.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask when they got married. And,
Okay.
he's going.
I believe it was 1928. I was born in 1929. I hope they got married in 1928. Early part,
This
hopefully.
is for your granddaughter.
Yes, okay. Okay, and my earliest recollections was not living at 100 Clymer Street, but about 10 blocks away at Berry Street. I think it was 60 Berry Street. It seemed that my father had an argument with my mother's mother and father, the in-laws, and moved away for a short while, maybe 6 months. And then
By himself? Moved out?
No, with the family.
Oh, okay.
We moved to 60 Berry Street, which was right around the corner from the Mundet Cork Factory, which was to play a little bit of a time in my life later. Because in school projects, I used to tell them that I lived around the corner, and they used to give me cork for school projects in public school. And I became a hero because I was the cork boy who used to get the cork.
Cork boy.
Cork,
No,
yeah.
wait, so how old are you now?
Oh,
So you were
before I
born-
moved back, I say I was 4 years old, 3 years old.
And it was just you? You had a brother or a sister?
No.
or-
Not yet, not yet.
So
We
you're-
moved back to 100 Clymer Street, and we stayed there for a few years. Then, going chronologically, my sister was born
1935.
in 1935.
Do you remember your sister being born?
Yes, I do, for one reason. When my father came back from the hospital and telling me that I have a little sister, he brought me a toy submarine, a metal submarine that you wound up and you put into the tub and it would go back and forth. These are one of the 2 toys I remember getting in my life. One was from, I remember two toys. The first one was the submarine, which I got from my father. And the second one was when I was about 11 years old or 12 years old. My uncle Abe, who was still alive, took me to the store below where they were living on Havamaya Street. There was a toy store, and bought me a football. Gave me a choice of either a football or a pair of roller skates. And I took the football, and those are the two toys I remember that I had as a child.
Okay.
Okay, I want to pause 1 second. I'm sorry.
Back again?
We're back in. Actually, I want to go back just for a second because like the depression was from 29.
Okay, the depression is an interesting little fact about depression. I was born October 22nd, 1929. The day of my circumcision was the day the stock market fell.
Crash. Baby Chris.
I don't want to say that had anything to do with it, but I just put things in chronological order.
So you
I
were
was-
born that
yes.
year.
I was born 7 days before the stock market took
Okay.
the header.
So how was like the first? Because that lasted what? How was it? 5, 6 years? What was
The whole youth was depression era.
it? Okay.
But did you feel like your family life was depressed?
You didn't know. You didn't
Everybody
know.
was the
When
same.
you're in a
It was all
family and you have a grandmother, a grandfather, and a mother. I'm leaving out my father for a reason.
You also have a sister.
And
Well,
a
not
sister.
then.
Not then.
Not
Not then.
29.
How-
Not
how-
till 35.
How much younger is your sister than you?
6 years.
6 years.
6 years younger than I am.
Wow.
So, we didn't know we were poor. We had food. We had each other. My grandfather would let me watch him work in his workroom. And I went to public school at the age of 5. At the age of 5, I was taken to public school, and I was doing well in kindergarten because I had a teacher who spoke Yiddish. That's all I spoke up to the time I went to public school. Her name was Mrs. Regenbogen, and she taught me to speak English while I was speaking Yiddish to her. And besides, in our area of Williamsburg, I would say 70% or 75% of the children there were Jewish, and we all spoke the language either as a first language or a second language. I mean, you take a look at the roster of names, we didn't have them. We had one child of color, and that wasn't until the 7th grade
Yeah.
that someone moved in who was non-white. But going through that early time, we didn't know we were poor. Nobody had a car. Oh, the people across the street had a car. Burton Bass, his father was, he was the same age as I was. And that's a bad...
They don't care about
Well, they
birthdays.
no.
Okay, wait a minute. His father was a truck driver, and when they found out that I was, going to school in in kindergarten, the following year, he ratted on our family, and I was put back to kindergarten again because I was underage.
We were both left back in kindergarten.
That's right. Mom and I were both
left back in kindergarten.
But I didn't have a happy childhood when it came to my father. My father was hardly ever home, and when he was home, he used to beat me. There was a time, I think I must have been 11 years old. I did something in the backyard. We had a beautiful backyard. And he picked up a rake, and he hit me with the rake. And I don't even...
How old were you?
What?
How old were you?
Anywhere between 9 and 11, I say, before I was bar mitzvahed. I would never, we never had a conversation or anything. We never spoke.
Now, did he drink?
No, he didn't drink, but he did go around a lot.
Okay.
He went out with the boys, there was no work. There was no work. So, I'm talking about the 1937, 38, in that era.
Mhm.
He would do whatever he could. But he tried to improve himself. He went to the Delahanty school, which was you had to pay to go to a school. He learned basic electricity. Then he went to a place called Brooklyn High School for Specialty Trades, which I went to later, many, many years later. And he tried to improve himself, and somehow he got into the union, the electrical union.
Got that from the ship.
Well, that's later. That's it.
But that's how he got into the
Yeah,
union,
right.
from being on
Right.
the ship.
He went sailing because it was pre-war and wartime. He would go to the docks and see if he can get hired as a seaman. And he hired out as the lowest thing you can be on a ship. And he worked his way up, and with his little education he got, he became an assistant electrician on a ship.
And this is, how old were you at this point?
I must have been 9, 10,
Okay,
11.
so I have a question. You said that he would hit you or
When he came home, or when he was
came
away.
home. But at this point you had a sister at this point as well. How was he with your sister?
Not good at all.
But he never hit her.
What?
He never hit
Never
her.
hit her, but he would ignore her. He would come to the point of, like this, he'd walk into the house, he'd see her, he'd practically spit on her, and just walk out.
And how was his relationship with your mother?
Tense, to say the best.
And
There was a time he came home from someplace. He sat down in our small kitchen. We had a kitchen maybe 6 feet by 8 feet. And she put a bowl of spaghetti in front of him with sauce in it. And he just picked it up and flung it against the ceiling. And he walked out. Walked out of the house.
Were you scared of him?
Oh, I was frightened of him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Aunt Rita was frightened of him?
I can't say that. I don't think she was that much around him, but he would do things like that, and for no reason at all, he would just haul off and hit. Well, there was a time I came home from school, and I was waiting for him. He was coming from someplace, and we knew he was coming from someplace. And as he walked down the street, the people across the street, the Basses, the Burton Basses, she called him over, and she told him that I hit her son. Now, her son must have weighed twice as much, a big, heavy kid, and I was like this. And as he stopped talking to her, I don't know what she was saying to him, he was walking across the street, and I ran to him, "Daddy, Daddy," and he punched me in my face. My nose was bleeding for hours. They could not stop the bleeding in my nose. And I don't know, I never saw him after that for a while, but I didn't know what happened. I just got powed,
How was your relationship with your mother?
Oh, very nice.
What was that like? And
Okay.
What was she like with you and with your sister?
She was very education oriented. When we were 6 years old or 5 years old, around the corner from us was a building which housed a Hebrew school or Yiddish school and a dance studio, one above the other. And my mother made an arrangement with both of them that when we came home from school at 3 o'clock, instead of coming home, because my mother was not there, she was working, as I said, in the sweatshops, we would go to the Hebrew school. Now, when I went to Hebrew school, that was the deeper class. And my sister would go to the dance school. She would learn tap dancing and ballet while I was learning that. And then, when I finished Hebrew school, I would go home and she would go to her early classes for the young children. She would go to school up there. And after a while, it was Miss Crawford's dance studio. They would take her and she would go entertaining in old age homes, and they asked me if I would play the mandolin for her while she was dancing. Would I accompany her dancing and I did, and I made a couple of pennies that way.
Did you know how to play music at that point?
Okay, I picked up an instrument and I somehow knew what to do. I can't explain it.
What was the first instrument you picked up and that happened?
believe it or not, it was a little penny flute, which had 8 holes on it, and I found that by doing certain things I could play a scale, and I love to play scales on it. And then I played melodies, and then my mother belonged to this, as I said, this chorus that sang, and they had a mandolin group, and she brought me there. I must have been 9 years old, 9 or 10 years old, and I played with this. The name of the group was the Chernyshevsky Mandolin Orchestra. What's the name of the group?
You remember everything.
Okay.
That's great.
So the Chernyshevsky Mandolin, and the teacher's name was Alexander Ivanovich Belokopitov. Okay. I can't help it. I remember.
And what did you have for breakfast today?
I don't remember what I had. But I started to play the mandolin, and there was a little group we formed that we used to play the mandolin, but that's not going out of chronological order. When I was about 11 years old, my sister Rita was about 2 or 3?
6 years apart.
6 years apart. That's 5.
5. Okay, then I must have been 7 years old, because she was only about 2 years old. My father decided they were going to move out of New York City. He went up to Massachusetts, right on the border of Connecticut. There's a place called Ashley Falls. There's Ashley Falls, and then there's Canaan, Connecticut. And he found a house, not unlike this one, in a nice, off the main street, and they bought it. They put down a down payment on it. And my father went off back to the Merchant Marine, or whatever he was working on at the time, and my mother and my little sister were left there, and we endured a winter. There were 2 Jewish families, our family and another family way, way high on the hill, the Levines. And we were the only 2 Jewish families, and we were disliked, we were disrespected, and after a year of terrible schools, the school was a big schoolroom with 8 rows of seats, and the 1st grade was here, and the 8th grade was here, and the teacher taught all the 8 grades. And one day, I remember, most embarrassing, I went there to the class, and sometime during the day I had to go to the bathroom, and I raised my hand, and the teacher, I don't remember the name or anything, said, yes, what is it, Jerome? And I said, I have to make a pookie, which was the expression that I learned when I was a kid. I grew up when you had to go to number 2. We didn't say number 2. There was a little term, pookie.
Or a duty.
Or a duty.
Or a duty, but we didn't use the word duty. It was a pookie. And the place just burst out laughing, and I was embarrassed, and it wasn't a happy time for me. And at the end of about a year, the owner of the house who we were buying it from, came to our door and wanted to come in to see what was going on in the house, and my mother wouldn't let her. And the woman was forcing herself into the house, and my mother bit her thumb.
Go Nana.
She bit her thumb, and the woman ran away and came back with the police, with the sheriff. And the sheriff told us, if we don't get out of the house and leave, they will bring a lawsuit against us. My mother didn't know what to do or anything, so she somehow got in touch with my father, came back, and we packed all our stuff, and we got a truck that was going up and down the state from New York City to Boston. And my mother and father gave him like $20, and he took all the stuff in his truck at one time and brought us back to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And we lost the house. All this was a terrible, terrible time. But later I was told, you could have sued her for breaking into your house and all that, but we didn't know anything. And they said, my mother was not that happy there anyway.
I thought, was your mother psychic?
No, I wouldn't say psychic, but she could sense things that were about to happen.
Grandmother.
What?
Grandmother was
Yeah, my grandmother also, and I don't know.
And
You
your
can't-
daughter?
What? And my daughter, yeah. But I will say this, that certain things do come up that they have a sixth sense about. But I wouldn't go as far as to say psych. That's nonsense. But go ahead.
Now, when you remember your mom as a kid, what did she look like?
To me, she was beautiful. I mean, she was dark-skinned. She always was in the sun. She always loved... Oh, and what a swimmer. Even though she had hardly any vision at all, she would go to the beach, go into the deep part of the water, and then swim, looking at the shore so she could see the outline of the shore, swim in one direction for miles, then turn around and swim this way, sideways, so she could see the shore, because if she lost the shore, she would be lost, hopelessly lost.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a powerful woman. She was strong, strong-willed.
You come from two very strong great-grandparents.
Okay. So that's...
Okay.
But she loved life. And as I said, she was a very, very... As a child, what do you know about you? No matter what
Right.
your mother looks like, she's your mother, and she's beautiful to you.
Now, you said like you spoke Yiddish.
Yiddish.
Until you went to school. Now, did your parents speak English very well? Or
Oh,
did
yes, yes. My father spoke English a little better than my mother did. I don't think my father spoke more than... he spoke English, Yiddish, and some Polish. Some Polish, because he came here at a very young age. And it wasn't spoken in the house.
So Yiddish was the only language spoken in the house?
Yiddish was a universal language. Every place you went, somebody spoke Yiddish.
Where you live.
Where we lived. Russian was spoken and Polish was spoken when they didn't want the grandchildren to know what was going on.
Okay.
Okay.
So was it really difficult for you when you were like kindergarten, first grade, second
Oh
grade?
no, it was wonderful. It was wonderful because I learned. I think I learned quickly, and I always loved to write things. I never had notebooks. I always memorized everything.
Okay.
I almost didn't graduate when I should have from public school because I didn't have a notebook from the entire term. I mean that I finished the tests and I did everything well.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to see a notebook, so I think about a month before the time you're supposed to have your notebook, I took 4 or 5 notebooks from somebody else, and I copied a line of word, a thing here, and I drew pictures. So whenever there was something to do with a topic, I drew a picture pertaining to that topic, and of course my book was held up as an example. At the end, look what Jerome did, and I did graduate public school.
Did you have a lot of friends?
I had a few friends. I think if I had 3 friends, it was a lot. I had my neighbor 2 doors down, a fellow by the name of Julius Shapiro. What do you want? Okay. I had a friend named Julius Shapiro. I had I wouldn't call not a girlfriend at that. It was public school, but I had a girl who played the violin named Esther Hetler, H-E-T-T. There we are. She played the violin, and I used to love to go over to her house and listen to her play. I didn't. That's the instrument I could never, not master. I couldn't even start it. Then I had 2 other friends who lived right next to the school, and they would walk with me to the Hebrew school because they would go also. That at the time that I did, right after school at 3 o'clock. Our class started at 3:30, so we used to walk. And sometimes we stopped by the bicycle store to see what was in there. We never had bicycles. But we used to look inside to see them and turn the wheels. And there was a lot of, that we considered fun.
Were you a lot poorer than from what you heard Mom talking about?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We were poor. I remember one time there was a quarter lying on the table in my house. And I took it. And I was looking forward to going lunchtime and getting 25 pennies. I loved the gumball machine. And I remember seeing my mother's face in the doorway of the school door in our classroom. And she was
She came to
she
the school.
came to the school for that quarter. I mean, and I was embarrassed, and like I was crying in the hall. I didn't make everybody know that, but what's a kid do? I don't remember how old I was. I may have been 9. But I took the quarter, I gave it to my mother, and she says, "Don't you ever," you know. And that quarter told me what the money was about. We never got money to go to any place to buy anything. Oh, Grandma spoke about going to the movies. We had a movie called The Dumps also. 5 cents to go in to see three movies, a cowboy picture and 2 regular movies, and chapters and the newsreel of the day or whatever it was, for 5 cents. We used to have a joke. If you lent them your handkerchief to use to cover up the holes in the screen, you could get in for nothing. That was how. But we had a lot. Oh, the movies were our lifesavers. We were movie oriented. We used to leave on a Saturday morning, 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, go to the movies and spend.
How old were you? About.
Oh, I would say I was 7.
No, you took Rita.
Yeah, 7 or 8 years old.
Well,
right?
you didn't take her to the
Okay,
movies
maybe
when
not
she
that
was
time.
2.
But I'm talking
She must
about
have been
myself.
7.
I'm talking about
Oh.
going myself. We used to get salami sandwiches. Salami sandwiches in paper bags, brown paper. Every kid came in with a paper bag with a salami sandwich.
And you were allowed to bring them to the theater.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Not like today.
Not like
Oh,
today.
we were in
And
the movies last night. The guy was eating Chinese food.
and I'll tell you, I can tell you right now, coming from my house, if you want to take the full road down on Broadway in Brooklyn, where I live, we passed the Dumps, the Williamsburg Theater, the Marcy Theater, the Commodore Theater, and then walk down 3 blocks to go to the RKO Republic. Those were our palaces, our heavens, where we would go and forget about what we.
Now, do you remember like a favorite movie?
One favorite movie? Well, I'll tell you, the first movie I ever saw that I really could understand and everything was The Hurricane with John Hall.
Okay.
That I remember. But I do remember much earlier than that, or I wouldn't say much, maybe a year earlier than that or so, my father and mother went to see The Life of Emile Zola with Paul Muni. And my father kept on hitting me because I was putting my fingers in my mouth, and I didn't enjoy them. Every time I watch a movie and I put my fingers in mine, he would hit me. And I think that's the only time I ever went to the movie with my father, I remember. The Life of Emile Zola with Paul Muni. I can't tell you what year it was or anything. You can look it up.
Now, do you remember ever sneaking into the movies when you were a kid?
Oh, one time. Yeah. What happened, there was a movie playing in the Commodore Theater, and everybody was going in. It was a big movie. I think, I'll tell you what it might have been. It might have been Down Argentine Way with Don Amici. I think that was it. But everybody was telling me it was a great movie, and I didn't have any money. I really had nothing. And I walked and I stood next to the ticket taker, a little old man. And I spoke to him for over an hour and a half, just standing there talking to him. And I said, "Okay, I guess I can go in now." And he says, "Where's your ticket?" I said, "I gave you my ticket." And he says, "No, you didn't, little boy, but don't do this again." And he let me in.
Aww.
I spoke to him for over an hour. I may have spoken
What was
for
his
2 hours.
name?
I don't remember.
You did that because you thought then he would forget?
Forget that I didn't give him the
You're
ticket.
trying to
That
butter
was
him up.
smart.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
You were a little
And-
conniver.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was always, home. I would stay home. I would practice whatever I had to practice. And I remember this. My mother used to put me in the summertime. I used to go into the backyard, and she would set up a little table, and she would take a Jewish book out, a Yiddish book, put it down, and then give me a notebook, and I would write a page a day of that Yiddish, in Yiddish, not translating it, but what was from block letters or printed letters to script. And I have the most beautiful Yiddish handwriting today. I teach Yiddish reading and writing today, but my handwriting is beautiful because of this, and I thank my mom for that.
Did you go to high school?
Yes. After.
Or did what? I know you went to some army thing. What's
Okay.
the story with that?
Okay.
No,
The
first-
war broke
wait,
out.
wait.
No, first of all, okay, yeah. When you do mention this, I want you to tell what the Merchant Marines is, because a lot of people don't even know that today.
Okay.
So,
Can I
okay.
get to that
yes,
point?
yeah.
The war broke out while I was still
What
in
war?
public school. The Second World War.
Okay.
The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
You don't need that.
have to go.
Wait,
What
I'm
about the
saying-
sinking of the Lusitania?
And
We'll leave that out.
And we,
Archduke
I was
Ferdinand.
in public school, PS 16, Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
And how old were you?
Must have been 12,
Okay.
11, 12, maybe even 13, I don't know. I can tell you and figure it out, but
Right. No. Okay.
I went to the shop. I used to like shop. I was no good at it, but we had woodworking shop. And one of the projects, a wartime project, was to make silhouette models of airplanes to send to the RAF, the Royal Air Force in England, so they could identify planes from the silhouettes. We made models of Stukas, we made models of Spitfires, the British Spitfires, we made models, and sand them down and work and make nice models. So I remember doing that during public school. Then, it was still wartime, I graduated public school, and I decided I didn't want an academic education. I loved working with my hands. So I went to Brooklyn High School for Specialty Trades, which was incidentally the same school my father went to some 10, 15 years before. And I got into the electrical courses, and I went 4 years in high school. Wait. I say I went 4 years. That 4 years took me 7 years, because after my third year, in 1945, latter part of 1945, I joined the Merchant Marine. I couldn't take school anymore. And what is the Merchant Marine? Merchant Marine is the ships that carry food and tools and machinery from country to country. That's the Merchant Marine, the merchants.
Now, didn't you have to be like 16 back then?
Yes, I think I was just about close enough, so my mother signed some papers, and they allowed me to go in. Now, this was just the end of wartime. I was sent to St. Petersburg, Florida, and joined and took the engine room. I wanted to study the engine room. I didn't want to be on the deck. I wanted the mechanical end of it. And I spent 6 months in the United States Maritime Service training.
And the only reason you went is because you couldn't stand school?
And I was being beaten by my father. That was the main reason. There was a time about 2 months before I joined where I did something, I don't know, I didn't think it was that bad, my father did, and I ran to hide in the bathroom. He put his fist through the bathroom door to get to me.
So your mother wanted you out of the house?
My mother wanted me out of the house, probably saved my life. And she said, go to war, it's better than being home, you know. So I graduated from the Maritime Service. The war was over. And I said, well, let me go back to high school. So
Did you go back to your parents' house after the war?
Yes, I did. My father was no longer there.
What happened?
Is she divorced?
When I came back, they decided to get a divorce, a Yiddish divorce, a Jewish divorce, which is called a get. And the papers were signed and everything. And my father told me, he says, you ought to stay, with me because he wanted
But
something.
you saw him when you came back.
Oh, sure. I had to be at the divorce. My mother didn't want to go to the divorce without.
So she wasn't already divorced when you were gone?
No.
Okay.
But it was a terrible time, and there was yelling and screaming. Even though there was a separation, it was not an amicable one.
So by the time you got back, though, it was you and your mom and your sister.
That's right. I went back to high school. I finished high school. But during the time I was going into high school, I had a friend of mine who we used to play mandolin together, who was working upstate New York in a hotel as a like a handyman and bar wipe. He used to carry up sodas from the cellar to the bar, and he said, "I can't do that anymore. You want to take the job over?" And I said, "Fine." And it's $18 a week and room and board. So I
Was
went
that
up.
good?
Yeah, very good.
1946, 47?
Yeah, 40, well, he graduated high school, so it must have been 46 or 47.
46, 47.
Okay.
And yeah, I think it was 47. And I went up there, and I took my mandolin with me. And one night, after cleaning up the bar and wiping it down and bringing up the sodas for the next day, I was playing the mandolin, and the owner came over to me and says, "Do you think you can put a string around that thing and walk around from table to table playing?" I said, "Sure, why not? I can try it if they give me a song, I can play it by ear." And I did that for a couple of weeks. And then we were locked in by a snowstorm. I went up on a Friday night. I had a friend who would drive up. He was the dance instructor. He would drive up with me. And there was a funny thing. We got locked in with the snow, and we got a telephone call. The square dance band and the caller can't come up. They're snowbound somewhere 40 miles away. And the owner came over to me and asked me, he said, "You think you can call a square dance?" I said, "I can try." I did. It was a lot of fun. I'd watched, the weeks before when they had the square dancing. I called the square dance, and after that he said, "You know what?" He pulled off $20, $30, and he said, "I want you to go get a black outfit, get some white scarves. You're going to be our social director." And I became, for 2 years, I was there weekends, and sometimes during the week, if it was a holiday during the week. I was the social director of Zinderest Park in Monroe, New York. And I think I went up to like $22 or $23 a week, room and board, and it was a wonderful experience. And, okay.
So that was your.
Okay, hold on. Okay. All right, we're pausing.